The recorder is started. Today is January 25th. Time is 10:17 in the morning. This is a closed session of the meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Rockland Fire Protection District being held at the district. Present are attorneys Brian O'Connor,
Carl Snoblin,
Dan Rogers,
Robert Grum,
Rich Karani,
Pete Siebert.
The purpose of the meeting, the purpose of the closed session today is to discuss the appointment, employment, compensation, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the district and or salary schedules for one or more employees of the district. I have, before we start, I printed a list of all the Rockland District employees just to make sure that we stay on track. For your reference. Yeah, well, we can pass these around.
I think we all know
There's another one, yeah.
Just out of curiosity, where did you pull this from?
From the website.
Oh, it's archaic. Yeah, this is
People that aren't here anymore.
ancient.
Okay.
From the district website.
Yep.
But, well, in that case, it would be helpful then to have a current list.
Best is to get that from Chief Harlow.
Okay.
I mean, I can pull it from the personnel records, but even that is not cool, honestly.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Because we do have people we don't pay, for 6 months because they're in their initial phase or whatever. So it really is best to get it from Chief Harlow.
Not a problem.
I want to make a comment or a statement for the record on this. The proposal in which we're going to refer to today, anything and everything that happens in this proposal, about this proposal, changes made to this proposal, amendments or suggestions to this proposal will in some way, shape, or form affect the personnel of the Rockland Fire Protection District.
432.
I have no idea.
I don't know if this one has a control on
I don't see the volume button.
I don't see a volume button anyhow. So for the record, the proposal, any changes made, any amendments, any suggestions will affect our chief, our deputy chief, and our personnel. That's my reason for being in executive session, because there will be a positive, negative, or neutral effect on any service changes that could occur with this proposal.
Okay, I just for the record, I would like to ask Brian, is that acceptable? 'Cause it strikes me as that could be perceived as somewhat tenuous connection to personnel.
No, because I'll talk theoretically. If theoretically Rockland were to cease providing, you don't provide ambulance now, but cease providing fire and instead ask one of these two departments or both of them to handle it, what would you do with the staff? If they took them, you'd be fine. Otherwise, you terminate them, and that's how you get under the 2C1.
Right, but and again, I'm just trying to make sure we're clear on that. But then, shouldn't the discussion be strictly on that impact to the people, not that which leads to that?
Well, I don't know how you get to the discussion of the impact of people until you understand what we're doing.
Right.
And in fact, I talked with John Kelly about it yesterday. He kind of agreed. We need to kind of keep it to the straight and narrow, And while we need to look at, or while we want to look at the proposal and the terms of the proposal, but like Dan said, you need to understand that and discuss the impact of those changes that it will have on the staff, or potentially on the salaries of the staff. I wasn't sure if you were going to talk salaries, and it may be premature to talk salaries, but I wasn't sure, so I put it on.
No, that discussion is, I apologize, that discussion will also took place at the meeting that I had with the two chiefs, talking about their compensation versus our compensation. But all that being said, again, strictly at this point in a hypothetical, if you were to accept a proposal as presented, you're going to drastically affect the personnel in this department. So any changes made to this proposal, any suggestions that you guys have today that you want to make to this proposal, anything that we walk through will ultimately affect our personnel. And during that discussion, that's important for us to understand, so that we, if there's a point at which something is proposed in this proposal that affects the personnel and we don't like it, then we need to speak up at that point during the proposal. So it's my feeling the entire proposal, there we go, I thought it was short, will affect it.
I guess the only thing I would say is, if you're just talking about, well, this price instead of that price, that doesn't affect the people that I can see, because if you do that, if you take the services, it has an impact. The price of the services has no impact on that, so I would think that would be off the table for right now.
Understood, but the price of the services would determine whether you would accept the proposal. I mean, it's a snowball, in my opinion, and everything included in these pages here, in my opinion, ultimately will affect our firefighters one way or the other. Either not at all, if we decide this isn't something we can work on, and if it is, then it'll affect them based on Chief Siebert may have I'm being hypothetical now, a personnel test, a written or a physical agility, saying if you were to accept this proposal, we would have a one-day, and I don't know anything about this stuff, Chief, so please don't take it as me being ignorant, that you had some type of physical agility and you had a basic class that they needed to pass. If that's something that would be part of this to take our employees or a number of them on, then we need to know that. I mean, we need to know all of this as it affects our employees. So with that, I'm going to try to open it up. And
my first question is, obviously, we're not in a position to look seriously at the last proposal based on the cost. But I guess before we start discussing that, are you two interested, either one or both, in pursuing additional proposals?
Well, I think so.
Amendments.
The comment downstairs was the proposal was rejected. So I'm hoping that, it's a matter of interpretation. I mean, the proposal as written was rejected, but I think we both have the authority to say there's room for discussion.
Okay, that's
points,
basically what I needed.
But we just know that Pete and I don't sign off. We bring back the message,
right.
and but yeah, there's room for discussion on all those points. But to the gist of this meeting, the difference in the two proposals, cost-wise, is the personnel component of it. There were, in our first proposal when it was just Libertyville, there was no personnel in that number, and when we turned and if Noah would have insisted that we bring on some people, that number would have had to change, because we did not incorporate any room for training, turnout gear, salaries, insurance, anything for personnel. And, we had a number of 8 or 10 or 12, somewhere in there, if we were going to have to do that to make it work. But so this proposal includes Knollwood personnel.
Knollwood or at other, it's going to need more personnel,
Yeah,
whether that's
or
Knollwood people or not. We do, to answer your question about a testing process, we do have a job description and we have minimum requirements. So that would be, at the very least, we would have to address that and looking where people fall within that. And we would be open to looking at everybody that meets the qualifications and making special compensation to bring them in and look at that. Because I believe that no matter, even if we got everybody qualified and we were able to bring them on, we might have enough people. But the way that we're limited for people working part-time hours and keeping people without having full benefits, we're really restricted, and we're going to need a pretty good force of people just to fill one spot 24 hours a day. Can take upwards of 10 to 15 people to do that. I know lots of other departments that do similar stuff, and there's models to follow. We currently only have 3 paid on call right now, paid on premise, sorry. And they're just there as our extra manpower. We're not relying on those people. So we're going to need to put together a program that relies on having part-time people.
Okay. I would think that ultimately, whatever Lake Bluff does will affect that because of economies of scale.
Yeah.
If you do both, then we probably, obviously you don't have to have double the number of people.
No.
That's not correct. So you'll get some economies of scale. So if they come, along with you, then it could be less expensive on that side than if not.
Yeah, well, that's a whole nother.
Right. It's an unknown at this
yeah.
point.
Yeah, and I would just, echo what Chief Karani said, is that, we're here on behalf of our city representatives. We've had our finance departments involved in coming up with an evaluation of how we came about it. We're not here to deliberate the cost or anything, but I think that we said, like, the current proposal was not necessarily rejected. It just felt it was
It was not
palatable at
right.
that time at
Right.
what all the limitations. So I think today our mission is to come out of here, what parts of the proposal are lacking, what parts are strong, what is the things that need to be changed, omitted, where, the end game of the station, the equipment and that, where that all falls in there, and then, basically, I guess, where how you would come up with evaluation. I have documentation of how they came about the fee structure of what we came with our proposal.
Okay.
And if you guys want to look it over,
I would
get copies for all of you.
Because as I expressed when the three of us met, and again, I'm making this, as I think I told you guys, called landscaper math. If you guys are going to divide this up, and one of the questions that we had was the fees, is Libertyville and Lake Forest going to be charging the same fees for the residents at the split? But that's not part of this.
Yeah, that's I think we're still at the high level here, and this
Right.
and this is challenging for Rich to come in with his fire village and his fire protection district, and then for us with Lake Forest, how all those different things come to economies of scale. And a lot of the talk is, well, we're just you can hear the people saying, well, it's just going to take over our bills. It's not it, but we do have more than just paying firefighters and that and running the calls. There's all those other costs that go in it, and so I got 4 copies.
Yeah,
of that, so
I completely understand that, Pete, and that's.
So I guess the kind of just what I take from it is that what we can come away with today is if you guys don't feel the numbers are fair, is there a methodology you feel that would be more suited to come up with a fair number? What that number is and what we bring back to open that dialogue, and what in this proposal is lacking, you need more meat or more definition to, or what needs to stay, what needs to go, type of thing.
So here's how I looked at it, and I haven't read this in complete. I can see numbers though. If you're each picking up roughly 125 calls, because we run about 250, right? So if you're each going to pick up half of the calls, at least in theory, it's not going to be exact. You're looking at about $250,000 each. You guys are going to get. I don't know if you guys were talking about on the current proposal splitting it down the middle, or if there was a 60-40 or whatever. If you're each going to pick up 125 calls, that's an additional 1 call approximately every 3rd day. And I'm just looking at this and trying to figure out, by adding 1 call every 3rd day to your call load, I understand the cost of the guys, completely understand the cost of what you're saying with the guys. I'm trying to figure out how to get to that number. Providing the fire service, the way I looked at it from all of this from the beginning on out, the most fair and equitable way was to take our EAV, which you've done here, and use Libertyville Fire Protection District's multiplier, because they have an actual multiplier for their taxes. And that's how, Rich, you got to the 380,000. And again, I understand picking up the new people, but other than picking up the new people cost, you're adding roughly 1 call to your call load every 3rd day. I understand you got to gear them out. I understand all of that. It just seems like a massive number, considering we're operating a building, equipment, insurance, and everything for about $100 grand more than where you're at. I mean, we're carrying all the overhead for 634. You already have the overhead, which won't change. Your overhead is going to be your overhead. The light bills are the light bills. You're still going to have to run the engines, and you still respond to us on mutual aid anyhow. I'm just trying to find a number that's
So
closer to the 380.
Well, and to kind of tie it back to why we're here. If you say this was just the Libertyville proposal.
Yep.
And we were at 380, and you guys, the board, insisted that, you know what, we want you to interview our people. We want you to consider 8 or 10 or 12 people. So say the number's 10, you know, and we want to use them, you know, on a regular, you know, we want to use those people.
I'm listening. I'm just
No,
looking.
I'm trying to think of a way to say this.
I don't want to think I'm ignoring you.
You want us to use those people not just on a call basis, but to have them involved. You know, there might be guys that are finishing up their paramedics. There might be guys who are paramedics and need to keep their skills up. So we don't want them just sitting home waiting for the one fire a year and no one. You want them involved. So in order to do that, you know, okay, would they bring their turnout gear over? Yes, but there's, you know, future costs of that. There's uniforms, there's insurance, there's physical testing, there's a salary associated with that. There's you know, a workers' comp cost with that. There's whatever other stuff comes with personnel that we would have had to negotiate in. And say that number came to between $70,000 and $80,000 for 10 or 12 people. So we would have had to talk back then about how we're going to, so all of a sudden that goes from 380 to, you know, we're up to 460, you know, or 455, 450, somewhere in there. And that's just for our department. So with the two of us coming in, when we decided to tag team this, you know, I think I said this a while back when we were talking about all this, or when we had our meetings, is the intriguing part of us working together.
Department engine 462, you're doing auto aid for the activated fire alarm at 1800 Amberley Court. So the Amberley Court condos. So
was to be able to provide you everything you wanted, and in some cases, more robustly than we could do it by ourselves, to help incorporate the people that you want us to incorporate. Make sure the residents have coverage, because a lot of people, you know, what if Station 3 is out? I mean, the gentleman this morning, well, they got to come all the way from Station 1. Well, that's not going to happen anymore. They're going to come from Lake Forest if we're out, and they're going to come from Libertyville if Lake Forest out. I mean, we're providing a unique coverage system that is going to provide the Rockland residents with what I perceive as an excellent level of coverage. The other thing is, I'm losing my train of thought real quick, but
I know that.
yeah, it's getting old.
Well,
But,
where there's one space, of course.
where the hell is it going with this?
431, you're back in.
I look at it as, like you said, it's
Keep
our villages, we're taking, you know, it's a risk on us. And a lot of what my direction has been, I can't reduce the service to the residents of Lake Forest. So you could say, well, it's one call every third day. Well, it could, they don't just run like that on the average. They could, I've been to Lake Bluff where we went there 6 times in one day. We could be here 10 times a day. We could have all of our equipment up here and a fire could occur in Lake Forest. So we know we're taking on some inherent risk that we are providing service to this small area that could be only this, you know, 1 year it could be 125 calls. They could be something where the flu breakout comes out, like that just went through, and Vernon Hills has gone to the assisted living center probably 10 times a day. You know, where we're constantly going there to help them. Those things can happen. We know that risk is out there, but again, it's not just paying for the call, it's paying to have that coverage, to increase our coverage, to have the extra manpower 24/7, 365, and to give this area that protection. Where now they have people working certain shifts. Not all the people here are getting paid. They come here and volunteer. They show up and get on a per call basis. They're not paying the salary of somebody, a full-time certified firefighter paramedics, to be there 24/7, 365. And I think that has to be evaluated in there, and that value has to be added in here. And I think that this blended formula, which our finance people work long and hard on, because you can't, there's no just, we'll just use this one thing. Every time you use the Rockland EAV or you use the Libertyville, one of those, they don't always work. So I think their approach of the weighted on the budget the number of households, the population of the EAB, makes sense. I mean, these are two, Patrice, their finance director, and Elizabeth Holub are two pretty intelligent people and well respected in their line of work. And they didn't just come up and say, let's just pick a number and let's make it fit to this. We didn't just pull that number out of the air. They came with this, and that's the number they came with. So that's, I guess, the challenge now is if it seems unfair, then what is a fair method of evaluation and putting a value to it, and how do we need to cut services to come down to a lower price, or do we need to modify the proposal, I guess is where we're at.
I mean, I think, Pete, I think you hit on one of the key difficulties in this, and that is the staffing model. Both of you have full-time career firefighters, and that has a lot of value. But for us, we've got a history of being able to use that volunteer model, which has worked, particularly in the last 4 years or so, where we switched from almost a purely paid-on-call to a paid-on-premise. We're staffing this station, and we have a core group of people that we can rely on, and therefore the cost of that model is much less. And I know that model won't work for you, but it works for us and looks to work for us. So that's kind of the nut to crack is, in order to get that service with your staffing model, it's going to cost more than it does with this staffing model. So,
right, as well in this 530, you know, with the staffing model, or you adding people on, you also benefit from those people. Mm-hmm. So I feel as though in here we're picking up the cost of the additional staff, even though you're benefiting from them as well. So that's where you know, and again, I hope neither one of you taking offense to any of this.
I don't take offense to it. I mean, it's not,
right.
We could benefit from it. It's rearranging and reorganizing the way we respond now. So there's benefits, but there's give and takes, because we have to reduce staffing at one station to add more people here. We have to change the way we staff vehicles. We have to change basically the whole way we do our job, and that's a lot of work, and it's labor intensive, because I can tell you right off the bat, I don't know how many people we could take from here. Even if we take 8 or 10, we're still going to probably need 8 or 10 more. All of these people, as you probably well know here, there's a great majority of them that desire to be a full-time firefighter somewhere else. So guess what happens when they leave? We got to get new uniforms, and guess who doesn't fit in the uniform we just left? We got to get new turnout gear, and it has to meet NFPA specs. We have to have them trained if they're not a paramedic, if they're not a firefighter. A paramedic academy costs $4,000, and we don't have the person for a year and a half. The firefighter academy is $4,000, and we lose them for 2 months. We go through all this. They work for us for 2 weeks. They get hired on another department full time, and they're gone. And then they're not allowed to work for us because of union rules. So I think a lot of these people here, because of union rules, would not be allowed to participate. I get it. The volunteer model works. I think we're seeing to the east of us, they're running up against it full force.
Well, the volunteer model
it's starting to fail. Yeah,
not for them,
because it's proven that you have to have people in the station. I mean, Lake Bluff is struggling, like every other volunteer department, struggling to have people available during the day. Right. So,
and I think it's safe to say that if we weren't responding to their calls, they would not be able to maintain a volunteer fire department.
Right. But again, they're really trying to, up to now, then stick with the pure paid-on-call, and it just doesn't work. And that's what we realized about 4 or 5 years ago, that we had to go to paid-on-premise and staff this station with a crew, it's 24 hours a day.
And it's not because of fire calls either. It's because of all the other stuff.
Yep.
You know, I mean, knock on wood, fires are down, and we keep our numbers relatively the same every year in the county. But it's the rescue calls, it's the lift assist, it's everything else that goes with assisting an aging population, and that's what we do. But what I wanted to point out earlier that I lost my train of thought was, along with this proposal comes additional services that from both of our agencies that you guys don't have, and that's the Fire Prevention Bureau and our public education group. So, I mean, I know you guys do some public education, but we would both have pretty robust programs that we throw into schools and whoever wanted them, in the community, the seniors. But then that inspectional services to get in and, they're housekeeping inspections, but to clean up some of the fire hazards that may or may not be out there. I mean, I'm not saying that there's a problem, all I'm saying is, if you don't get into places at least every 2 years, you know, there's things that can easily be pointed out that some people don't pay attention to, like simply as does your smoke detector work? You know, simple things like that can save lives. So, you know, that's time that's going to be spent in the Rockland Fire Protection District that, you know, both of our agencies are going to take care of as part of this. So, you know, there's, you know, I don't know, it's hard. We can't, again, negotiate a number, and this probably isn't the right place to do that, but we can at least tell you what, you know, is going into that. And the biggest thing is that's impacting it, and it has to, is the personnel. I mean, because in order for Lake Forest to participate in this, they have to bring up their staff, so, to make it work. And then you know, the whole, like we were talking, the Lake Bluff piece, that's something down the road, you know, that shouldn't affect what happens here necessarily.
Yeah, but would it affect the cost though? I mean, if Lake Bluff came on, I mean, do you see at some point,
I can just tell you that Lake Bluff is a totally different animal, because
right.
They are with our village, with the city of Lake Forest, they have an IGA and not just fire on, it's
right.
just ambulance service, but they also is senior center, Croya,
right.
schools, parks. There's
right.
so much more, so it's so complicated. Can that augment and help what's going on here? Yes, I think that if something positive comes from there, we could look, if we look, and this is going 10 steps beyond, if
yep.
we staff a crew out of that station that could respond here, would only increase our response. It would, you know, make our response times that much better to this area. Again, that calls for even more manpower, so it's even more labor intensive. The one gentleman down there who's a retired Highland Park fireman, you know, says that it's negligent of us not to add people. Well, I can tell you firsthand, and I'm sure Rich can share the same information, we're not going to be allowed to put on full-time people. Bob used to be on our department. He knows where there's a time where we had 11 personnel on shift. We're back down we're lucky to stay at 10, and we're fighting for that. Our pensions and our pension levies keep increasing and are charted to go off the charts, and that keeps me in front of my city council and answering questions to there. So this is the only way we can add personnel, is to go with part-time. And
you know, and I didn't want to get into it with that gentleman, but I really was tempted to ask him, how many men did Highland Park put on when they took over Highwood? Because to the best of my knowledge, I didn't think they did any.
I think they hired one of their people, but they didn't put anybody on.
Fill
They got rid of an ambulance and a truck.
Yeah.
And I suspect that's where it's coming from, is that doesn't really
yeah, but
work
I know a lot of people in Highwood that are very pleased with the way it turned out, and they're very happy with it.
There's 1,000 calls in Highwood versus 50.
And not even. Yeah, they were.
And I haven't heard of any outrage out of Highwood because of what went down. I mean, they're very pleased with what's happening.
So and you two jump in, I'm just gonna lay this out, and then we can move past the money. So please, Trustee Snowland and Grum, make your comments. My number in my head when you guys came back adding Lake Forest in, I thought you were gonna be about 430. That's what I had in my tiny little mind without running all these numbers. Additionally, now I've done a Rich, and I've lost my train of thought. Additionally, I saw nothing in here about a lock-in price, as in for the first 5 years, for the first 1 year. I saw nothing regarding increases, and for me personally, to give this much of any thought with these two trustees, I think you have to do something like a 20-year contract renewable at year 10. These are my personal views, and I'm going to ask the two of you when I finish to jump in. So from the dollars and cents, that was the dollar amount in my head. I saw no increases. I saw nothing on how you would rate the increase. We're going up 1% because of this. We're going up cost of living. I saw the increases, or I don't see the increases tied to anything. And I also didn't see, which I really hope to see, if this happens, it's going to go down.
So maybe I can help you out a little bit. So what we did is put together a generic proposal to give you, the board, an idea of what we want to offer you and about what's going to cost.
Right.
So we are also having in the actual IGA drafted that would break out those details that we're going to have to meet with you at some point in time to discuss. And I think when we met with you individually, all of you expressed different things. We took those notes, and I know you expressed, I believe, the same thing. You said 20-year renewable is year 10.
Yeah, minimum.
So now we know that kind of stuff. So if you guys say, okay, bring us this draft ICA, we can have that in there. We can have the increases in there and that kind of stuff, and then work from there.
Well, I'd like to hear from the other two trustees if they had comments on the dollars and cents and the other items as well.
Just real quick though, so
Yep.
that page 16 is future year contract adjustments will be a discussion point prior to the execution of any formal service agreement. There's numerous, so I think that
No, I know
to
it's
address
in
it, like
there.
Rich was saying, that
I understand.
they just
I
don't
didn't,
wanna,
I didn't mean that
Yeah.
you didn't get it. I meant.
I think
that-
it just hasn't been,
Right.
that hasn't been addressed yet.
Right. Carl and Bob, please,
Sorry.
I'd like to hear your comments regarding.
I again felt that it would be lower than that. I was thinking, again, probably more in the, 450 or so. And I'm not aware that we staff 24 hours a day here. My understanding is we do 8-hour shifts.
No, it's not strictly 24 hours, but it's pretty darn close.
Right.
These days. Again, you have to get with Chief Harlow on the specifics, but they're not 8-hour shifts. They're
Because I know, Chief Grani, that a
I
lot
thought
of
it was
times you guys
8 to
are-
5, Monday through Saturday or something. That's how it was
Yeah.
initially when they came up with it.
I mean, most of your conflict times with calls happen during the day, would be my understanding.
the
at least
busiest
my
time, yeah,
experience.
is between, I think, like 9 and
So
3.
I guess I was thinking in terms of when I saw the numbers that, trying to figure out manpower costs, we certainly wouldn't expect more coverage than what we're getting now. And I think that 8 to 5 is probably a reasonable staffing issue. And then during the evening hours, when you're less likely to call a crew in for training or things like that, that their likelihood of being in station is much greater. And then certainly, as we talked on the response end of it, if we divide Norwood in half for response, certainly if somebody on the south side is having a heart attack or comes in as a bad accident, the response time from Lake Forest is going to be longer than it would be from Libertyville.
So in those types of calls, we're probably, for sure, car accidents, it's going to be a joint response. One's going to send the ambulance, one's going to send the engine, depending on where the accident is.
Right.
And, full arrests typically get dispatched with an engine. So if Lake Forest is going to come with an ambulance, we'll most likely send a Station 3 engine. If we're going with an ambulance, we'd send a Lake Forest engine. So somebody is going to get there, and then we always need that extra manpower.
And
especially on those
dispatch
types of
would
calls.
have that authority.
Dispatch, well, we can set it up that way.
Yeah,
I mean,
if they see something critical and it's in
right.
your
They always
district
have
but
the
you're not
authority
there,
to bump it up
then
or
okay.
go right to the shift commander
Right.
to ask for that.
Carl?
I was just going to follow what Bob said, though, because of the two different dispatch centers. I'm assuming that even that would be relatively seamless if it comes to you, but you say nope, or to you, but you're closer. That the two different dispatch centers would not be an issue in getting that put in the right place and dispatched quickly.
No, so
it's already happening right now.
I mean,
with every
yeah.
Lake Bluff call, is you hear it, they're getting
That's
phone.
true.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's we go, or these guys come mutual aid with us, and we go mutual aid with them all the time on that Route 60 and the tollway corridor. So
We just heard them just now. I mean, I got my call and he got his call. They were coming to us to go as an ARA over to Amberley Court right off of the 560 in the toll.
And the other issue about bringing up Lake Bluff is obviously we have taken on their industrial center for response.
Yeah.
Any contract or anything we would agree to would no longer include that response. That probably is going to get shoved to Lake Bluff back to them, and they're going to probably come to you and say, hey, we need your help in responding to this.
We already do respond.
So
We're already going to Lake Bluff.
so
We
that-
come there with them,
yeah.
so we're already going there.
Right, but
So,
that's
some
gonna
costs on
lessen
their part.
our calls as well.
Yeah,
If you
right.
guys
I look
take
at it
over us,
both Norwood and Lake Bluff. If Norwood is no longer, Lake Bluff calls, they're, like they don't go to Lake Bluff, that's half the calls. I mean, that's.
it's not just Lake Bluff, it's North Chicago, it's
Yeah.
Libertyville, it's Lake Forest. I mean, Knollwood response is gone.
Right.
So how that gets picked up in these other communities has to be discussed with those communities. I mean, so if North Chicago truly needs an engine, then, you know, we don't respond automatically to most of North Chicago, just a little bit of it.
Right.
If they want us to come automatically to all their fires and take place of that Knollwood engine, we're gonna have to talk to them about that. Otherwise, they're gonna have to go to someone else or figure it out. You know, I mean, I also, and I think I've said this in a few meetings, and I don't know if necessarily with you guys, but, you know, we've gotten to a point where we're a little out of control with the amount of equipment that gets sent to calls.
Yep.
So one engine responses for fire alarms is acceptable. ISO accepts them.
Yeah.
The structure fires, it's a different story.
I know, I
Maybe
see this
target
over in the industrial park all the time. All this frickin' equipment comes to a false alarm. You come, we come, if they're
Say the
around,
same
they
thing for an
come.
ambulance call.
Well, and we respond to
Lake
Lake Bluff for residential fire alarms.
But there's a reason that's happening. It's so somebody gets there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, but when you have a reliable person or
Right.
group there, then you can back off that response to the one engine or a shift commander or whatever.
Carl, do you have a dollars and cents comment or thought?
No, just you know, my thought on that was that as you said, as the proposal made it very clear, is that some certain, you know, facts like that would have to be negotiated. So that was why we would, my intent or perception on that is we would work that out if we move forward. So I'm fine with that.
But do you have a number in your head or not when you're really?
No, I really don't have a number in my head. That number is just really too high to you know, for it to make sense for us. But no, I don't have a sense of what would be a good number.
Okay, couple other things that I've got. Equipment use, obviously if you're gonna, or I shouldn't say obviously, if you're gonna have these extra guys doing things, are you gonna need additional equipment? And do we have that equipment? Would our Rescue 44 fill in for something that you'd need? Would you guys be wanting to purchase any of the other engines and or equipment?
I don't know, I know for myself, we don't need additional equipment. Some of our equipment's ready, we're on a replacement issue, so it could be something that could be economically suitable for both parties involved. But we have more than enough where we're actually gonna start to scale down with some reserve rigs that we don't use, but I think that's something that's open and on the table. If there's some use for that it could be negotiated.
Yeah, the Rescue 44 vehicle may be of interest to us because we're gonna, if it gets approved through our budget process, we are going to experiment with a personnel detail with Countryside and have a vehicle on the road during the day that would be staffed with 2 people to handle all of what I'll call our non-emergent type calls, so batteries and smoke detectors, chirping smoke detectors, CO calls, lift assists, trouble alarms, elevator alarms, and then they'd be out doing fire inspections. So a little vehicle like that might appeal, and then, you know, if and when, you know, we decide that program was gonna work and that vehicle became attractive, you know, if this all was to happen, there's opportunities to say, hey, let's get a fair market value on that, and then either we pay for it or deduct it off the bill, or however that would work, you know, down the road. But I think there's, you know, and the same with these guys, if they're looking for an engine, you know, what's the fair market value, and then do they pay for it, or do they deduct it off the bill, you know, X amount a year, you know, to cover, you know, I mean, there's ways to make that work, and then, you know, obviously anything else is yours to sell or do whatever, and we'd certainly be here to help you guys through that process, if you need it.
What about the building use? Either one of you have any intention on using this building for anything if this were to occur?
At this point, I don't think we do. I mean, to me, it doesn't make sense. It makes no sense at all to have, I mean, that's part of this whole discussion is why is there, you know, a North Chicago Station 2, a Libertyville Station 3 in Knollwood, and a Lake Bluff, and that's what we're trying, as the big picture, even beyond this, is how do we start taking baby steps in the county to get rid of some of this duplication of service? And that's where we think this is a good opportunity. Well, I know the residents want people to be in here and be at the station. Is there a chance to keep this station viable and use it for another purpose? I think we're willing to look at that to try and help. You know, we talked about, you know, possibly renting it back to the SRT, using it for a training center, having some, you know, capability for it to be a community building in some type. But if we keep this as a fire station, we'll just perpetuate the problem. And that was one of our questions, you know, what are your plans? Do you want to keep the building?
Well,
'Cause if it's-
our
if it's
plans
gonna
are,
be-
our plans are to keep making the loan payment each month.
Yeah.
You know, we've got roughly 8 more years to pay the loan off on this. So again, in the hypothetical that this were to move forward, this board has to deal with either renting it. In my opinion, it's not a saleable building because anybody that were to purchase it knows that someday, whatever that day is, there's an end to this. So what is the use for this building that can generate a dollar amount that pays this building off? Certainly 8 years from now, it becomes a lot more palatable when we don't have a $90,000 a year payment to a year to keep this place going. And even if we don't use it, it doesn't mean we don't have to pay electric, gas, maintenance, utilities, maintain the building. So, this is another reason why I'm asking on the cost end, what the increases look like. And the 8-year mark is a big mark in my eyes for this board. At 8 years, our expenses drop $90,000.
Yeah.
That makes it a lot. Go ahead.
Yeah, but ethically, we have to reduce the levy by $90,000.
No, I understand. I'm talking about our overall costs.
Right, but that's neutral, because as soon as the building stops costing us $90,000, we return $90,000
I agree
to
with
the
that.
taxpayers.
I agree with that. But I'm saying
So
right
that's
now,
a net zero.
I got you, but right now it's still a payment.
Even with the thought of something happening to this building down the road, if somebody were to be interested in buying it, certainly if the state comes in and says, we're gonna take
That would be
this,
the ultimate.
they would have to pay them fair market value or
Well,
better.
and Rummel had talked about that they were talking to the state, and I think this is all smoke and mirrors at this point. But be that as it may, of the state coming in, buying the building and leasing it back for $1 a year.
I could see that could be a possibility. I've heard that same talk.
Well, I've heard talk, but I've not seen individuals from the state show up with an IDOT or an Illinois Department
Yeah.
of money hat on saying, we'll buy it. That's fine. If they come up and want to buy it and clear out our loan and put money in the bank and lease it back for $1 a year, I'll be the first one, jumping up and down saying that was my idea. But I haven't seen it. So I think it's a great idea, but I have a lot of great ideas. Nobody wants to listen to them though. What else have you guys got? Have you guys got any thoughts on where we're at on this? Carl, Bob, you guys have each individually met with this. Is there anything else that makes this proposal something that this board should discuss as it relates to the district and how it'll affect our personnel?
I guess, to me, it keeps coming back to how are we going to reduce response times, say if Libertyville is out of their station. And to me, it keeps coming back to at least a number, whatever it may be, of our personnel that could fill that gap. I'm not sure how exactly would be the best way to do it. I'm not totally sure that it needs to involve 24-hour around-the-clock participation. But I would be interested in seeing any other ideas or thoughts that might at least reduce the anxiety of Norwood residents.
Well, here's something I just thought of.
Oh boy,
And I know, so
I'm only good for one good idea a
my
day.
chocolate
so I don't
milk's
know.
kicking in.
Yeah.
So, I think down the road, the ideal thing would be for a deal to work out with Lake Bluff and Lake Forest.
Oh, no doubt.
Where Lake Forest is in that station 24/7, or at least during the day, however. That would make that vehicle available to come here in a shorter response time.
Mm-hmm.
In the meantime, there's nothing that says Lake Forest and Libertyville can't work out a deal where that Lake Forest ambulance is in our station during the day with their paid on premise until something works out. So the calls on this side of the tracks, Libertyville takes it, Lake Forest is sitting there and they go to the Lake Forest call if they need to, or they go to the Lake Bluff call if they need to. But if it's on their side of the tracks, then they take it, but they're coming from a different location. So it just occurred to me that that's a possibility. We have the room, and whether they did it during the day only with their paid on premise or did it 24/7, I'm sure we could work that out. As long as the biggest thing for, I'm sure, their bargaining group and our bargaining group would be that you're not in there to take our calls, and we're not there to take their calls, and all that kind of stuff, you know, and we can work that out, but it meets, I think it takes care of your issue.
Yeah, I think a cooperative effort with the 4 stations makes a lot of sense.
Well, and again, not being very proficient at the fire business like you guys are, I think that if something were to worked out between us, I think that escalates Lake Bluff working something out with Lake Forest, and I kind of see the whole thing pulling together. That again, that's just me. I mean, I've said for years it should be the Lake Bluff, Lake Forest, Knollwood Fire Department. It should have been one department a million years ago. That was my feeling for 30 years. This is almost there. I didn't envision you coming into this, but I also didn't envision that station, which has been a godsend. Yeah. You know, so I think it'll be a snowball effect if something comes up, and if we can get to a spot where this board feels like they can take a vote or have a discussion about it, or whatever the board decides to do, then I think the next domino to come down into the mix will be Lake Bluff.
And it almost seems like, you know, we're wasting some time if eventually, I mean, I can't not believe that Lake Bluff doesn't understand the predicament that they're in. Should we do something?
I think they understand it very well.
So why?
Well, they're trying to work something out with Harlow now. Chief Harlow and Chief Graff have got something going on. I haven't been included in it yet, but I don't. Again, I haven't heard it, so I won't pass judgment. But you've got 2 areas that both have the same problem. I don't think combining the problems fixes the problem. I mean, I'm sorry. I would like to have the full-time department covering my calls.
And both departments still have to rely on a department to transport. So,
right.
You know, to me, that doesn't accomplish anything. 2 struggling departments together are still a struggling department.
Right. And adding us
I would
getting into
like
the
to
ambulance business, I don't think that's a.
I'd like to
It's
see
an
this.
expensive proposition to get into the ambulance business.
Yeah,
to
I don't even
start,
want
you
to.
know.
Yeah, I mean, I could see a step being eliminated here if we could get to the point where all 4 departments could come together and say, look, we need to work this out.
Well, if at some point Lake Forest, Libertyville, and Rockland can come to a point that this looks like we might have something, then we make the phone call and say, hey, we might have something here. We think you need to come and listen and maybe be a part of this. Maybe it's not in that particular agreement, but then that gets them talking with Lake Forest.
Right.
You know, I think that can, and then they might see that this isn't such a bad thing, because I don't think, and I don't want to speak for Pete or the city of Lake Forest, but I don't think their intention is to go in and take it over. Their intention is to go in, get their people in there so they have a better response time to Lake Forest.
You've read our proposal. I mean,
And beef up their service. You know, they'll still have their volunteers. They'll still be able to come to their calls. And that's a little different situation because, you know, Lake Bluff is, you know, a lot bigger community, a lot different, a lot more spread out, where, you know, NOLA is a postage stamp of 8/10 of a square mile. So it's easier to, you know, cover this area the way we're proposing it. So,
Yeah, I would say, I would be much happier if we were doing a 4-way conversation, because again, almost half of our district is in the municipality of Lake Bluff. Yeah. And that's important that those sanctuary residents are in our district, but they have the extra issue of being in Lake Bluff that we need to be concerned about. And again, since we are really supposed to be focused on personnel, I think, as I said at the beginning, is that the personnel issues become much easier if they were included. So I would really,
I mean, if we
much
go to
better
that
if we
should
could
be our goal, to bring them in.
Yeah.
You know, if we go to the point of coming up with something that's, you know, just about a final project, if Lake Bluff then steps up and says, you know what, we better be a part of this, well, then everything starts changing again.
A very small bookkeeping thing. On this piece you passed out, would everybody do me a favor and write the word draft on the front of this? Just so that it stays the way it
This
is.
is confidential.
No, that doesn't cover it, draft. This is a draft copy. Otherwise, this is gonna be flying all over the area and,
You did, but I brought one with me.
okay, well, let's make it a draft, please. Okay.
Can I just offer?
Please, I would, please open
like
your
to
mouth.
ask, this is really geared to the three of you.
Yeah,
Let's assume there's some sort of agreement, three-way, four-way agreement, so that statutory fire prevention and emergency medical service and technical rescue are provided. It sounds like we're not going to use the district. Would the district be interested in maintaining a small staff here to enhance that response? And I'm just thinking, if you kept, you don't have an ambulance, that's out of the question. I agree with the chief that you'd be dead in the water. But even on a reduced annual income, if you kept like an engine 44 with a small day staff, if daytime's thing, or maybe a small day staff and a night staff, because one of the comments I've heard in the conversations downstairs and we've talked about here is the response time. And if you have if you have a small staff here whenever you want, then it can be used to augment the response from whatever department is coming. But of course, there's cost to that, because now you're maintaining the station, you're maintaining a vehicle, you're maintaining the people. But if you don't need as many people,
I
Yeah,
think
but the
that,
problem
I think
That's
that-
what they're already doing.
yeah, I
They're-
think
they
that's
are
exactly what
going
I'm
to
doing, and I
small
think you
staff.
become
2 to 3
cost
people.
prohibitive, because we still have to pay you, we still have to pay the people here, we have to pay insurance on them, we have to pay work comp, we have to pay the overhead of the building. You know, if this were to work out, I would foresee calling Murphy's or some other ambulance service and see if you could rent the building to them, or I don't know, you would have to go out and look at renting this building out.
Because even if you
You
cut
guys
staff
determined if-
dramatically,
Huh?
you still have to have paramedics on that vehicle. So now, if one of those paramedics or two of those paramedics get hired somewhere else, we're not even guaranteed we can maintain a paramedic staff here.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I like the concept, but I suspect that as soon as you start looking at the numbers, it probably wouldn't be. Is that
Yeah, it'd be,
it would? We could probably only drop our expenses a little bit. What I imagine what we would think that the price of the service from you would also drop because we would need less service, and we could provide service where we need. Though that might be an issue for you guys. Possibly. So I like the thought, but I'm guessing that the numbers just wouldn't bear out.
and that's why I just threw it out there as a thought piece, because I suspect you're right, Carl. I suspect, and I suspect it's going to be too expensive to retain, because in order to retain it, you still need a minimum staff. I mean, and that minimum staff, to ensure that minimum staff requires 3 times that, whatever the number is. You know, and you still have, even if you cut it to one vehicle, you still got the vehicle.
still got insurance.
You still got the
fuel,
insurance, you
gotta
still got the
maintain.
vehicle, the station, you still got that. And there's cost involved, but on the other hand, you know, it provides, I mean, I don't have the picture of the geography in my mind, but Libertyville is west, and including the station on the north on Atkinson, and Lake Bluff is to the northeast, and Lake Forest is to the east, and North Chicago is somewhere up there, and God knows who's down there. But what I'm envisioning is like the old westerns. Circle the wagons, the Indians are around us. All our support is around us, whereas this station is kind of like well sited to support here. The problem is, like you mentioned, Chief Cronny, here is such a small little piece. You know, it's questionable whether it's fiscally viable. But
Well,
Yeah,
and
but if you
it-
looked at all the communities that we're talking about, Lake Bluff, Lake Forest, Libertyville, and Knollwood, if you combined into one fire department, the positioning of Lake Bluff Station, Libertyville Station, Lake Forest 2 stations really works out pretty
They're
pretty
perfect.
decent.
It's actually better
Yeah.
staffed and or better laid out than
Positioned.
our 3 stations in
Sure.
Libertyville.
Exactly.
I mean, it's all about railroad tracks, really, when you get down to it. And you're right. I mean, your station 3 hits the north part of Knollwood over the EJ&E tracks. You're right there. Where from here, to get to there, we have to go over the tracks. Lake Bluff has to go over there, we have to go,
Yeah.
to Lake Bluff. So I mean, the tracks do really complicated. If it weren't for that, we could certainly do with a lot less stations. But, no, Brian, I think, I like the idea and that's why, for me, I keep coming back to Lake Bluff is because I think that's kind of what happens if we really do it very conceptually, is that if you sort of have a Lake Forest satellite sitting up here between the two, that's kind of staffed by, their volunteers, our volunteers, backfilled by you, and to kind of service that area. So that's kind of the general concept, and I think that makes a lot of sense. But if we combine the efforts rather than we do one thing, you do another thing, and then figure out if they do.
That's the ultimate goal for us, but we can't. Unfortunately, we can't just do that. It's
Right.
this almost has to occur to
Right.
put the pressure on them to realize that, and then that deal can go forward. And that deal is way more complicated than this.
No, 'cause
But our ultimate goal, like I said, is to provide the best protection for the area without reducing the service to our residents. And it's a case of taking on people to be able to do this one, taking on even more people to do that one or both together. So.
Can you cut the cost at all by using our payment model versus your payment model for paid on premise?
I think
Because we're paying a hell of a lot less than you are.
we're never going to get people to come in. We're competing right now with people at Countryside Fire Department, Lake Villa, Antioch, the people that we can get to come out. They're paying more.
There's an expectation for those that are seeking true paid on premise work of an hourly wage, and it's whatever, the 17 or 18.
I know some people are paying
That's my other
25.
concern here is what happens is these people start going away and all of a sudden we're getting less on people.
Well, that's why the burden is on us, that we're going to have to put together a robust program that we're actively recruiting people, because we know we lose them now just to keep 3. We have to work hard on that, and that's working in just our current hiring list. But I think, like you said, there's so much of these questions that people like, well, what's going to happen to the people, and these, this is a place that's grooming people to be full time. I've got a solid record of 9 or 10 people in the last 5-6 years that have gone from a paid on premise with us to full time. They're working, they're serving there right now, from Lake Bluff, from Knollwood, from Countryside, from other places that we've brought them to, and that's what we use the program for.
Well, nobody's gonna make a career out of being a paid on premise.
No.
I would. Those are and do we want somebody that's going to be a career paid on premise?
I mean, we hired dozens of guys from Schaumburg and, different communities out there that lasted maybe 6 months or a year, and then as soon as they got called from a station closer to their home,
I'm
they
thinking
went.
about making it a retirement career. I could bounce around and make all kinds of.
There you go.
Yeah,
They
and one of the
back on
other
the rig.
one of the other things
old and-
that are paid on, our volunteers, as you say, is a lot of the people come here to get the training to hopefully enable them to get a full-time career. But also, you say we've got a number of people who are working full-time in other departments, and it's the additional income. But also, too, they get the opportunity to function at a higher level, so they may be lieutenants, which will help their career.
And
which
unfortunately, they can do that because this is termed a volunteer fire department.
Right, I
But
see.
we
You guys
have our
can't do that.
They can't do that
Yeah.
because the unions will not allow it on some
Mhm.
of these if that becomes a reclassification. But yeah, I look at that and I mean, and how many people are actually Knollwood residents that are actually working here? And that's where that misconception of
these
that
days
it's
it's less
our
than 50%.
yeah, that it's our community volunteers. Well, that's Lake Bluff is challenged now.
Yeah,
They don't
they
have.
can't do that.
They've gone through that generation. We go through the generation of our people that we're hiring now. The millennials are new people that don't even want to. When they're done with their 24-hour shift, they don't want to come back. We have to force them to work overtime. So that's another thing of getting people that are even interested in the job. It's
Does
going
Lake
to be a
Bluff even
full-time
have
job for
any
one of my people to
paramedics
run this.
that respond to their calls?
I don't know.
Does Lake Bluff even have any paramedics that respond to their calls?
They're not considered paramedics when they're on Lake Bluff. Because they're not licensed to have paramedics. They are EMTs, so they function as an EMT. We have we have Russell and Matt Kluchka and Tim Kluchka who basically are the Lake Bluff Fire Department. They're all
That's right.
paramedics at other fire departments. They're not allowed to function on that as a paramedic when they arrive.
Just like we are.
Well, I mean, you guys have people
We
that
have
function.
We have
as-
paramedics.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
you have ALS
Sorry.
engines.
Yeah, we're
so-
running ALS engines.
Right.
They don't have that. They don't have a cardiac monitor. They run with an AED. They can do, but that's the whole.
Right.
step process there, but, yeah, and our, you guys have seen our bid to them is to try to take on some of their people and maybe even, keep aside a core volunteer contingent
Right.
there.
Carla, are there any other comments you have, questions, queries,
Not
things
at this
that
time.
bother you, things that you like, things that you don't like about what you saw in this proposal?
Nothing that I don't think I've said already.
Okay.
Well,
Bob?
I guess my feelings are that as long as there's willingness on your parts for a proposal, I say we continue to discuss those.
Yeah, I said that at the meeting. I won't stop discussing and working on this until you guys say we're out, and then you're out. Is there any other things that you guys had that you see as changes or whatever that you want to make or bring?
No,
that you felt that the three of us have addressed, or that you hear from the peanut gallery?
No, I think, you know, from my perspective, I'd just like to know our process moving forward. Obviously, if we want to, if the three of us, or if the group here wants to meet, we're going to have to do it downstairs to talk about, you know, a lot of this contractual stuff. So is there one particular trustee that, you know, wants to, that you would assign to work with us on an IGA or something like that?
Well,
To kind of, and then bring it back to you guys when it's a, you know, a pretty relatively good draft or something, so.
Yeah,
Well-
that's typically the, you know, have one designated person. to do it.
and again, please feel free to chirp up on this, Carl. The most qualified person in the field of firefighting is probably Bob. Of the three of us, I would say I'm the least qualified to do that. So if you're okay with Bob, that's fine.
Then when we go into open session,
I understand that.
Just
Okay.
a quick question for Brian. Is discussing, you know, in preparing for a contract and doing contract discussions, is that acceptable for closed session? Okay.
and in fact, that's.
No, but if just one of us is meeting.
Oh, no, that's
One
not,
is
but
right.
it's just saying.
But that's why the agenda was written as that. That's taken right from the Red Book. You know, that's what you can talk about, and it's very limited. I mean, and in fact, I just wrote, I mean, my three takeaways from this are, you know, the big personnel use, station and equipment use, and then the service costs, if you provide both.
Right.
Right? Because it's like, are we going to keep people? If we're going to keep people, how many people are we going to keep? Where are we going to keep them at? You know, and then at some point you get to the pay of what's their compensation going to be, and I think it's important to note too their costs, and they're absolutely right. I mean, they've got salaries, you've got uniforms, you've got turnout gear, you know, you've got the training, the insurance, the work. They got all sorts of craziness they got to go through. So the personnel costs, then you get the station equipment use, and that's, do you keep it? Do you not keep it? And like Dan said, if you've got 8 more years of loan payments, well, you know, 9 years from now is a very different story than right now. But what do you do and maybe it takes that long to get it done. I don't know.
Well, and I see the potential if we were to be in a position where we could liquidate our equipment, plus our reserves, you know, we could probably come darn close to paying that mortgage off.
It might be.
I don't know. I mean, again, that's a big if,
Right.
based on what we could do, because I know used fire equipment is usually not
It's not
a big seller.
It's
I
like a
mean,
classic car. It's like
Yeah,
it's like the
exactly.
labor of love type of thing.
You know, not to beat on that though, but whether we're paying $90,000 to the bank or
No, I got you.
$90,000 to the taxpayers, we ain't got $90,000.
I just
No,
got
I got
another
you.
question actually, so,
Please.
one thing that would help us out, you know, in determining a potential use for the station is, if you owe $90,000 a year, and if you wanna recuperate all your costs, someone's gonna have to pay you $7,500 a month rent.
Right.
But I'm gonna assume you guys wanna keep a portion of the station for your office and for your meetings, cause you're gonna still have to conduct a monthly district meeting, you know, so.
We wouldn't have to.
You know,
No, we
we
could
could
do
go
it.
quarterly.
We can also go
use
to
your
the township.
station.
Or we
Well,
could-
and you
yes.
could, you know.
No, I didn't mean that being
Or-
a smart ass.
or the township.
Or the township office.
Yeah.
So no, we wouldn't have to. The only thing that I would feel obligated to address is the elections.
Yeah.
They do use this as an election center.
As long as it's a public held building, I mean, and, you know, you could work that into whatever lease, but
Right.
I don't, you know, on the Mavis side, you know, this building would be ideal for our SRT in Lake County or Division 4. We just had a meeting yesterday. We've got stuff sitting outside that shouldn't be sitting outside, and no one has. Everybody's stations are full. I mean, we got rid of a vehicle and then we picked up another asset. So we got NIPUS equipment in our station, we got SRT equipment in our station, we got Mavis equipment in our station, and not everybody can house a lot of stuff. So to coordinate that here, have the meeting rooms and be able to do trainings here and stuff would appeal, but I don't know what you guys are looking for rent a month. And
to be honest with you, I would probably suggest that the board look at a commercial real estate company and give us some ideas, find out what the market is out there. I have no clue. I don't know, maybe a Murphy's Ambulance Service would trip all over themselves to get here to have the bunks and the bays, and maybe they would go absolutely bonkers over this. Maybe they look at it and go, are you crazy? We don't need that. Maybe Fred's Towing would say, wow, what a great place to have a place for our tow truck. I don't, I'm so far out of that. I would certainly entertain Mavis as it would help.
I mean that would be a very, very good fit. And realistically, we just need to look at what the market value
and I'm
is.
thinking,
we don't have to get 7,500 because
right.
But unless that's the market value.
And on the Mavis side, you could still, if we were involved in that, we could offer that you guys keep an office and a conference room and whatever to have a place for your stuff.
Sure.
That's not a big deal, but until the building, whatever happens to the building. So if you could get some kind of numbers, that would be helpful. So.
To be honest with you, I don't, and maybe you need them, but I don't think we're at that point yet. I mean, I gotta believe that at some point where if you guys start talking and you come up with something you feel is palatable, that the board should have an open meeting to discuss this. The station use, I think, is probably the tiniest portion of this.
Although my only thing is that it might help you guys with the cost piece, because if you can recoup X amount of your mortgage every year to pay off, that's going to make the contract and whatever you guys are thinking about a little different. So just some more revenue you got coming in.
I mean, I can certainly ask. I just don't want to get everybody into a complete fucking frenzy that there's real estate people running around here looking at the building for no apparent reason. I mean, you want to really light things on fire, that'll do it.
Well, I think, just a quick phone call to a couple people and say, hey, I got an X amount of square foot building with X amount of square foot office space, X amount of square foot apparatus space.
Yeah, just to get a ballpark figure.
Okay. You guys got anything else for us?
I guess, just looking at my thing to bring back to my boss is, and kind of what we went over, is there anything in the proposal that you guys think is like services you don't like or you don't want or needs to be added or changed? If we're just, the way I take it from today's meeting is the price, the overall price, some of the logistics and fine points of the actual IGA are what need to be sorted out, but the proposal as it sits
if I remember
to provide
right,
how we provide the service.
You have quite a list of services that you provide to your communities and stuff. And I'm not sure that Knollwood needs quite that extensive a list of cheat sheet. We don't have any schools in our district.
Well, and I know when it comes down, I think that's just kind of the feel we get from our boss is that if it's strictly a price option, then that's where that discussion needs to be held, but not in a public meeting. So if you guys can put a representative and they can meet with our finance people and our managers, that we could say, you see how we've come up with our draft there of how we've evaluated if there's a better formula or something that makes it more palatable, then that would be where we'd have to go with it. Because otherwise, we're kind of at that sticking point of where, we're here, you're there, but we're not in that capacity. Rich and I aren't here to say, we'll do it for this, we'll do it for that, because it's just not our wheelhouse.
I think you guys made notes when the three of us met. I mean, my notes were that the costs are the same for both areas, that one resident is getting paid more than other. How you would structure payments I had, building use we've addressed. interior and exterior maintenance of the building. At least at our meeting, it was still our building, so we were gonna have to maintain it. We talked about commercial inspection fees briefly, equipment use, paid on premise, to make, I just wanted you guys to make sure that you guys figured into this draft dollars and cents, that you guys benefit from it as well, and that it's not just us absorbing the cost, to be quite honest. And then the terms of an agreement, I can't look at, I can't even think of this board looking at any less than 20 years that automatically renews at year 10. I just can't. I think it honestly should be.
The IGA would be.
Yeah, I think it should be longer than that. Personally, if it were me, I'd like to see it 50 years, renew at 40, and be done with it. Then you're done screwing around with it. This every 10 years stuff, I think just speak up.
I would say the lawyers are going to get involved in the end.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to make the municipalities
Better too.
feel better, yeah, if it's a longer, because they're projecting out all the time 5 to 7 to 10 years. So
it's
you don't
absolutely,
want to have.
but it's absolutely ridiculous to have something short term. That just,
Yeah.
that's ridiculous.
No,
If
it's
you're
gotta be
going to
longer.
even consider this stuff, it has to be long term.
Well, it's more
And-
ridiculous for you guys because if you liquidate,
Yeah,
Yeah.
how do you go back?
And all of a sudden something blows up.
And the increases, I would certainly like to see a locked-in number for, like I said, a fair amount of time. And then what do you foresee the percentage increases based on what? You're gonna base it on cost of living? You're gonna base it on Carl's taxes? What are we gonna base it off of? Because,
I think too, a couple of other things just to think about in contract stuff is the future of this district. Will this district exist, and make sure the contract takes that into account? Because we could, a couple of things
Dissolve
that
the
could,
district, yeah.
it becomes a paper district. The laws
Right.
might change. They might force us to dissolve or be, acquired or merged with
Yeah.
one of the other districts, or we make it incorporated by one of the surrounding municipalities.
Yeah,
All
because
those
that-
things need to be probably anticipated.
that makes, your point is important because that makes a big difference on our agreement because
Yeah.
it's not like if the Rockland district went away, half could go to Lake Forest and half could come. It would probably all have
Has
to
to
go
be
to the
absorbed into
district.
one, yes.
And
The most
Well,
likely,
and-
your fire protection district would be the
Right.
most logical, I would
Right.
think.
Just
And
ask
actually, if you
Jim
look
Bensky,
at that
he
on
says
your
that we're gonna
tax
be
bill,
making up
based with
a
our,
district.
our factor multiplier and
It's a lower
the
rate.
one from Libertyville, my taxes would go down $200 or $300 if we incorporated in
you live in a
Libertyville
high
Fire
rate
Protection District.
Right. Unless they hit us with an SSA.
if you had that kind of a pension.
Hey, easy. I want that cut from the minutes.
But anyways, those are just a couple of things to think about.
Yeah.
Since we are talking about a long time frame.
Yeah, because again, hypothetically, which I don't ever foresee happening, say 2 years from now, Lake Bluff comes out and says, we want to annex all of Knollwood
Or Green Oaks.
or Green Oaks.
Green Oaks, I could see Green Oaks doing all up to the middle of Waukegan Road. for
Here's
sure.
the
Lake
problem.
Bluff has 2 paper districts itself. They have-
Right, the
Yeah,
problem with
Garden
that
North.
is
That's
nothing in the zoning matches Green Oaks' zoning.
No, they'd have to change it.
Yeah, they'd have to create a whole separate zoning district. All right, anybody else got anything else to say? So I want to make a motion to close the executive session at 11:31 a.m. I have a
Second.
second. Roll call vote. Trustee Snowden.
Aye.
Trustee Crum.
Aye.
Trustee Rogers. Aye. Okay, so we'll go downstairs, open the meeting, and make a motion to have Bob.
Well, do